This is another program of Near and Far. I'm Richard Kemp. I have a tape here, Global Village or Global Pillage, and how the people around the world are challenging the corporate globalization. It is a tape that was done by the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which is a nonprofit organization that advances human rights and social justice in the United States and around the world. It's a little dated, but I think it has some information that will be helpful in our quest for economic and social justice. Thanks for watching. It's about 26 minutes.
The global economy. For those with wealth and power, it's meant big benefits. But what does the global economy mean for the rest of us? Are we destined to be its victims? Or can we shape its future and our own? Globalization, the new world economy. Trendy terms. Whether we like it or not, the global economy now affects us as consumers, as workers, as citizens, and as members of the human family. Janet Pratt used to work at a Westinghouse plant in Union City, Indiana. She found out how directly she could be affected by the global economy when the plant was closed and she lost her job. Her employer opened a new plant in Juarez, Mexico, and asked Janet to help train the workers there.
First, I thought, you crazy? Do you think I'm going to go down there and help you out? I wanted to find out where my job was, where it went. So that's why I had decided to go.
She took her video camera.
What I found there was a completely different world. You get into Juarez and nothing but run-down shacks, and they were hard-working people. They were working, doing the same thing I did up here, but they were working for 85 cents an hour. I up here was working for a lot more than that. When I left Westinghouse, I was making $13.65 an hour.
As Janet Pratt discovered, in today's global economy, it is getting easier and easier for companies to move their operations around the world. This promotional video encouraging companies to move to Mexico proclaims the benefits of moving to low-wage areas.
Why have so many American manufacturers moved production to Mexico? Simply put, the U.S.-Mexico production sharing concept works. American manufacturers report savings of up to $25,000 per direct labor employee per year, due to the fact that the Mexican hourly minimum wage has remained under $1 per hour for the past 8 years.
Basically, and I think the companies are pretty open about this, they roam the world really with no checks and balances in search of misery and poverty and unemployment, because they will tell you in their own testimonies that naturally in those areas you will find the lowest wages. It's a brilliant system. I mean, it's worked handsomely for the companies, but it's deadly for human rights.
Corporations that used to be American or British or Japanese have gone global. Of the 100 largest economies in the world today, 51 are not countries, but huge global corporations.
corporations can move their operations around the world with the greatest of ease. And so they can pit workers and entire countries off against each other to see who will provide the lowest wages and the cheapest environmental and social costs. The result is what has been called a race to the bottom. Each seems to be getting ahead, but in fact, all are being driven down to the level of the poorest and most desperate.
What we hear from our members, working people around this country, is that every week, really, when they sit down at the bargaining table to talk to their bosses about trying to get a decent wage or better working conditions or better enforcement of existing standards, that their bosses say, well, we can always move.
I'm afraid. We all should be afraid of what's happening because we're being proven over and over again that our labor is no longer needed to make this system function. It may be cheaper to get it overseas. So we're really part of this globalization process.
This race to the bottom is definitely come back to the United States in the growth of sweatshops, which not only violate every single wage and hour law and human dignity, they don't pay taxes either, these sweatshops. They're unregulated. So they're riding on the back of the rest of the people.
It's not just unskilled labor that is being pulled into the race to the bottom.
Computer software programmers or data entry jobs are also mobile. And the companies are finding they can save even more money on a computer programmer or an engineer than they can save on a production floor worker.
When companies move around the world, they are also able to escape environmental regulations.
Countries compete to lower environmental regulations to attract global corporations. The pollution those corporations pour into the air, land, and water poison people locally. But environmental degradation doesn't stop at national borders. It affects people all over the world through global warming, the depletion of the ozone layer, deforestation, or the extinction of endangered species.
The era of globalization has been marked by a growing gap between rich and poor. In the last 4 years of the millennium, the number of people living in abject poverty worldwide increased by 200 million. In those same 4 years, the world's 200 richest people doubled their wealth.
Third world countries are being forced to race to the bottom. They have to compete with each other, outbid each other in offering cheaper labor than their competitors, and also offering more stringent legislation to control labor. So you get both repression and increased poverty. You depress the economy, but you also repress the freedom of the people.
When we first came upon some of these activities of the U.S. companies, we saw these ads in Bobbin magazine, which is the largest apparel journal in the world. And it tells you that you could hire Rosa Martinez. She'll produce apparel for the U.S. markets on her sewing machine in El Salvador, and you could hire her for 57 cents an hour. She and her co-workers, Rosa's more than just colorful. I mean, they put that little dig in there, racist dig. She and her co-workers are known for their industriousness and reliability and quick learning. You pay her 57 cents an hour. That was in 1990. In 1991, you have the exact same ad. There's Rosa again, except her wages are now cut in half. It's 33 cents an hour.
The race to the bottom. It affects our environment, our jobs, and our communities. It makes many people feel powerless. But are people powerless in the face of globalization? Some people are trying to do something about the global economy. They are creating new grassroots movements, using new technologies, and finding new ways to cooperate across national borders.
There's a growing understanding of what corporate globalization is all about. And as more people understand this, they understand what the countering strategies have to be. They understand what coalitions have to be built between labor, environment, consumer, the children's groups, progressive people in government. They understand the march of democracy against the juggernaut of autocratic corporate globalism.
Globalization puts people in different parts of the world in competition, but it thereby gives them a common interest in forestalling a race to the bottom.
There are enormous common interests between the people in the United States and the people around the world who are now drawn into the global economy by the multinationals. It's not just a moral connection or a human connection, it is this connection of self-interest. Like, if we don't work together to raise standards, there is no place for the economy to go except down.
Instead of competing in the race to the bottom, some people are joining together in what's been called the Lilliput strategy. The tiny Lilliputians in the story Gulliver's Travels were able to capture Gulliver, even though he was many times their size, by tying him with hundreds of threads. So workers and communities are reversing the race to the bottom by joining together around the world.
A prime example of the race to the bottom has been the global growth of sweatshops. Factories that exploit low-paid labor, working under inhuman working conditions.
Do they treat their workers well here? Not so. Do they ever yell at the workers? Or
a veces gritan, ¿cómo está el trato? ¿Cómo? They scream, they scream.
Do they ever hit anyone?
A veces golpean la gente o no? Yeah.
The worldwide campaign against sweatshops is a prime example of the Lilliput strategy. When young women sewing clothes for the Gap in a sweatshop in El Salvador tried to start a union, they were fired. But to the Gap's surprise, they were able to link up with supporters in the United States.
We would have meetings with like 200 workers at a time. I mean, it was extraordinary.
Shame on the Gap!
Human rights groups and unions in the United States pressured the Gap to improve conditions in its factories in Central America.
Local garment workers charged through the Schuylkill Mall fighting foreign imports. Today's target, the Gap clothing store. These textile workers don't want imports banned. They would like the U.S. government and retailers to force factories overseas to improve slave wages and conditions. That's why they've brought Judith and Claudia to the United States. Both teens work in 14-hour day, split shifts, 7 days a week in Central American clothing mills.
Judith makes 56 cents an hour. For an 8-hour day, that's $4.50 a day. So a company like the Gap pays the 40 workers who produce these 1,100 shirts. They pay them collectively $180 in wages and take out $22,000 worth of T-shirts.
The Gap finally agreed to open the factory to regular inspection by local religious and human rights groups.
And so they signed the agreement, and for the first time that I know of, a contractor's factory was open to independent investigation, and it's up and running.
The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated.
Students across the country joined the anti-sweatshop movement. They held sit-ins demanding that their university stop selling clothes made in sweatshops.
We want rights for women because 90% of the people who produce our clothing are women. Nowhere, and I mean nowhere in this world, should a 14-year-old girl be forced to work 60 hours a week with only 1 day off. And nowhere!
Duke, Wisconsin, Georgetown, and other universities agreed to student demands that they stop selling clothes made in sweatshops.
We make a big point that this sweatshop work, this human rights work, is not only the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, it's also in your self-interest. If you don't want to see your wages decline and your living standard decline and your children's living standard decline, we better do something fast to put a net underneath this global economy and begin to ratchet up human rights and living and working condition standards, or else we're all going down.
As corporations go global, workers in different countries are beginning to develop new ways to support each other across national borders. When the Japanese-owned Bridgestone Firestone Company demanded 12-hour shifts and a 30% wage cut for new workers in its American factories, workers struck. Bridgestone Firestone fired them all and replaced them with 2,300 strikebreakers. American workers appealed to Bridgestone Firestone workers around the world for help.
If there's ever a fight that we were determined to win, this is the fight.
And they got it. In Brazil, Bridgestone workers staged one-hour work stoppages, then worked like turtles, the Brazilian phrase for a slowdown. In Japan, 500 Japanese unionists marched through the streets of Tokyo, supporting Bridgestone Firestone workers from the U.S. In the wake of the worldwide campaign, Bridgestone Firestone unexpectedly agreed to rehire its locked-out American workers. Who makes the rules for the global economy? It's not a government elected by the world's people. It's a group of little-known international institutions.
The World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Trade Organization exercise powers that were once reserved for national governments. They make decisions that affect the lives of millions of people, and yet they are almost completely unaccountable to any democratic process. They have therefore become prime targets for the Lilliput strategy.
When the government of India proposed to build the Sardar Sarovar Dam with funds from the World Bank, tens of thousands of people protested against the destruction of their homes and villages, even threatening to let themselves be drowned in the rising waters before they would abandon their land.
Here we are near a statue of resolve in this village, and it is in every single village in this region. The slogan that the people have raised is "Koi nahi hatega, ban nahi banega." This simply means that no one would move out, the dam will not be built.
900 organizations from 37 countries pledged a campaign to defund the World Bank if the dam went ahead. Faced with such a global threat, the World Bank canceled its support for the dam.
These integrated communities are not backward, but are rather the hope for the future that would bring in the human vision of life to the whole world.
As the economy has become more global, poorer countries have fallen deeper and deeper in debt, especially with the international economic crisis that began in Asia in the late 1990s.
Banks and international investors loaned money to poor countries and made a killing. Much of the money went to powerful politicians and their wealthy cronies, and they made a killing too. Then the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund insisted that in order to pay back the loans, poor countries close schools and hospitals, chop down their forests and export the logs, and choke off credit to poor farmers who were forced to leave the land and move to overcrowded cities. It's another aspect of the race to the bottom. The loans had made the rich richer, but it was the poor who had to suffer so that they could be repaid.
Religious groups around the world initiated a Jubilee 2000 campaign, demanding that these debts be canceled. In Birmingham, England, 60,000 people linked arms around leaders of the world's richest countries, demanding that they end the chain of debt. A year later, 40,000 people surrounded the same leaders in Cologne, Germany. Under intense pressure, the rich countries agreed to cancel about 1/5 of the debt owed by the world's poorest countries. Jubilee 2000 is now campaigning for complete cancellation of the rest.
We are going to make them hear us, because this message, this event is going to be replicated all across the United States of America, all across the Americas, all across Africa, Asia, Latin America, Europe, the whole world, and eventually they know, we know, they will have to listen to us.
Trade agreements like NAFTA and the World Trade Organization have reshaped the global economy, but they too are being targeted by the Lilliput strategy. When negotiations began in secret for a new agreement known as the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, or MAI, opponents got hold of a secret draft of the treaty and posted it on the internet for all to see.
If these rules are passed, it means that they're global, or they're on their way to being global. It means that we not only have all those rules protecting the trade issues, but now total and complete investment, plus a provision for the first time in this form that gives transnational corporations in a treaty right more power than nation states. It is, in effect, the transition from nation state to corporate rule.
Opponents organized in 70 countries and coordinated their action around the world.
I'm from Norway. I'm John Jones. I represent the Norwegian Forum for Environmental Development.
My name is Sarah Okran, and I work with the Africa Secretariat of the Third World Network, which is based in Accra, Ghana.
Hello, my name is Manuel Perez. I come from Equipo Pueblo in Mexico City.
Collectively, we came from all over the world here. We're going to go all over the world back home and tell the story.
Their global strategy worked. As the Financial Post reported, there is little doubt that the Internet and its widespread use by non-governmental organizations opposed to the pact played a pivotal role in sinking the widely unpopular deal.
Now, many of these same groups are promoting very different rules for the global economy, rules which protect human rights and the environment and block the race to the bottom.
Obviously, the direction we're moving in is that basic human rights, worker rights, environmental rights, health and safety rights must be incorporated right inside our trade bills, right inside our trade legislation.
If you don't set a floor beneath which no one will drop and make that floor your human rights standards, everyone is entitled to food, everyone is entitled to freedom of speech, everyone is entitled to education, medical care, but also the freedom to vote for the way they want to vote. Everyone is entitled to exercise control over these economic actors that are affecting their lives. That is a human right.
Here's something to share with you.
Through grassroots organizing combined with mutual support around the world, ordinary people are beginning to find ways to counter the race to the bottom.
If our only choice is to have globalization that means drastic cuts in Social Security and lower wages and lower benefits and so on, we don't want that kind of globalization. But we can define a different kind of globalization that would protect those basic rights and still allow goods to cross borders and investment to cross borders and so on, but with ground rules that protected both the social services and basic labor and
For a video cassette of this program, send $25 to Preamble Center, 1737 21st Street Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20009.